Granite Peak wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Carved into the heart of the Colorado Rockies in 1983, 2 miles beneath the Continental Divide, it had been America's answer to Soviet doomsday. A fortress designed to survive nuclear annihilation and keep the nation's deadliest secrets buried forever in granite and steel. For 4 decades, it had stood silent and impregnable, a monument to Cold War paranoia that had somehow proven prophetic. The geothermal generators buried another mile below still hummed their steady rhythm. The blast doors still held their perfect seals. The secrets still waited in the darkness. But now in the autumn of 2024, budget cuts and politicians who had never seen real war wanted it mothballed, decommissioned, forgotten. In 3 weeks, Granite Peak would join the graveyard of obsolete relics, its blast doors sealed forever, its secrets entombed. Nobody questioned this decision. Nobody except one woman sitting alone in the legacy systems room, staring at a computer screen that was trying to tell her something terrible. Megan Caldwell had never planned to spend her 26th birthday underground. She sat in front of a DOS terminal that predated her birth by a decade, watching green text scroll across a monochrome screen. The room smelled of recycled air and machine oil. Magnetic tape reels spun behind protective glass, more storing data in formats that most modern technicians couldn't read. The younger staff called this place the museum. They walked past it without a second glance, their attention fixed on tablets and smartphones and systems they actually understood. Megan understood all of it, the old and the new. That was why she was here, alone, at 6 in the morning, running diagnostics that nobody had asked her to run. 4 years in Army intelligence had taught her one absolute truth: patterns don't lie. Not people lie. Systems lie. But patterns, the raw mathematical fingerprints left behind by any sustained activity, those always told the truth. And for 14 days, the seismic sensors throughout Granite Peak had been telling her something was very wrong. She pulled up the data feed again. Micro delays in sensor response. Tiny fluctuations in the detection grid. Each one meaningless in isolation. Together, they formed a pattern that made her stomach tighten. Usually, Megan had flagged this anomaly to Captain. Megan had flagged this anomaly to Captain Preston Whitmore 2 days ago. He had barely looked up from his tablet. Atmospheric interference from winter weather. Normal fluctuation? Don't worry about it. She had tried again yesterday. Same response, same dismissive wave of his hand. Same implication that a tech analyst shouldn't concern herself with security matters above her pay grade. Megan turned back to her screen and kept working, because she knew what reconnaissance looked like. She had spent 4 years identifying it in satellite imagery, in communication intercepts, in the digital breadcrumbs left behind by enemies who thought they were invisible. This was reconnaissance, and whoever was conducting it had access to the original 1983 blueprints. The footsteps in the corridor were so soft that Megan almost missed them. She turned in her chair, hand instinctively moving toward the sidearm she no longer carried. Old habits. 4 years out of uniform, and her body still remembered. The woman who appeared in the doorway looked like she belonged in a hardware store, not a classified military installation. 62 years old, maybe older. Faded contractor coveralls that had seen better decades. A metal toolbox in one hand and a clipboard in the other. Gray hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her contractor badge identified her as E. Sinclair. Final systems audit. Just another civilian counting down the days until Granite Peak closed and her contract ended. Except, Megan watched the woman move into the room, and something cold prickled at the base of her skull. The instinct that had kept her alive during 2 deployments, the awareness that never turned off. This woman moved wrong. Not wrong like a threat. Wrong like someone who knew exactly where every piece of equipment was located. Wrong like someone walking through their own home in the dark. Her feet found the path between workstations without conscious thought. Her eyes tracked across the room with the mechanical efficiency of someone conducting an inspection rather than an exploration. The woman stopped at the main terminal bank, set down her toolbox, went and began typing on a keyboard that most people in this facility didn't know how to turn on. Her fingers moved across the keys with the fluid confidence of someone who had written this code. Megan stood slowly. "You've been here before." The woman's hands paused for just a fraction of a second, then resumed typing. A long time ago. Another lifetime. The voice was steady, controlled. The voice of someone who had spent decades learning how to reveal nothing. Megan walked closer, studying the data streams now flowing across the screen. Fortran code from 1983. Diagnostic routines that weren't in any manual she had ever read. The anomalies I've been tracking, Megan said. The sensor delays. The pattern in the detection grid. You see it too. The woman turned. Her eyes were sharp and gray, like winter steel. They studied Megan with an intensity that felt almost physical. What do you see? Someone mapping our blind spots. Testing response times. Building a profile for infiltration. The woman nodded slowly. And what does Captain Whitmore think? He thinks it's atmospheric interference. A ghost of a smile crossed the woman's weathered face. Of course he does. She turned back to the terminal and pulled up a different data feed. Access logs from the facility's secure network. 3 weeks of activity, filtered and sorted by authorization level. Megan leaned closer. Her breath caught. Captain Whitmore's terminal was highlighted in red, when his authorization code had been used to download the facility's original construction blueprints. Every corridor, every system, every defensive position. 3 weeks ago, the woman said quietly, someone used his credentials to access files that haven't been touched since the Berlin Wall fell. That's impossible. Those files are air-gapped. No network connection. They were air-gapped. Until the 2019 digitization project connected the legacy archive to the main system. A security vulnerability that was documented, flagged, and subsequently ignored. Megan's mind was racing. Who are you? The woman closed the data feed with a single keystroke. The screen returned to its normal diagnostic display. Nothing to indicate what they had just been looking at. Someone who designed this facility, every wall, every system, every secret, in 1983. She picked up her toolbox and turned toward the door. My name is Eleanor Sinclair. Wanted to breach Vault 7 and access launch to breach Vault 7 and access launch codes that were never deactivated. Megan felt the blood drain from her face. Launch codes. 47 ICBM silos in Kazakhstan and Ukraine. Mothballed after the Soviet collapse, but never dismantled. The warheads are still alive. The codes in that vault could wake them up. Oh, and that's not possible. Those codes were invalidated decades ago. They were supposed to be. Eleanor's voice carried the weight of decisions made before Megan was born. Politics, pride, the belief that American power should never voluntarily diminish itself. So they were buried instead, forgotten by everyone except the people who needed to remember. She paused at the door, looking back. I've been watching this facility for 4 days. Everyone else sees what they expect to see. An old contractor doing routine work before closure. But you noticed me. You noticed the anomalies. You're the first person in this entire facility who's actually paying attention. What do you need me to do? Help me. Be my eyes and ears while I investigate. Don't trust anyone with what you know, especially not Whitmore. You think he's the leak? I think his terminal was compromised. Whether through negligence or intent, I don't know yet. But someone inside this facility sold our blueprints. And whoever bought them is coming. Eleanor stepped into the corridor and disappeared into the shadows. Megan stood alone in the legacy systems room, her heart pounding against her ribs. The green screens glowed in the darkness. The tape reels spun their endless rotations. Somewhere above her, through 2 miles of granite and steel, winter was settling over the Colorado mountains. And somewhere out there, enemies were preparing to tear apart everything this fortress had been built to protect. The main hangar bay opened like a cathedral carved from living rock. Overhead lighting cast harsh shadows across training equipment and parked vehicles. 60 personnel moved through morning routines, some running maintenance checks, others clustered around equipment racks, their voices echoing in the vast space. Megan had spent the morning doing exactly what Eleanor had asked, watching, listening, cataloging the rhythms of a facility preparing for its own funeral. She noticed things she had overlooked before. The security cameras that didn't quite cover their assigned sectors. The maintenance corridors that appeared on no official map. The way certain veteran staff moved through the facility with the unconscious familiarity of people who had been here far longer than the current record showed. and she noticed Colton Ashford. He stood at the center of the trainee formation, like a king holding court, 25 years old, built like a linebacker. Now, with the kind of confidence that came from never being truly tested, his voice carried across the entire hangar, loud enough to make junior personnel flinch. No, no, no. Jesus Christ, Ramirez. My grandmother could spot those mistakes, and she's been dead for 5 years. Nervous laughter from the surrounding trainees, the kind of laughter that was really submission dressed up as amusement. Megan knew his type. She had served with a dozen variations during her Army years. The ones who confused volume with authority. The ones who believed their family connections made them bulletproof. The ones who had never learned the difference between being feared and being respected. His name tape said Ashford. His personnel file said his father was a United States Senator from Texas. His behavior said he had never been told no by anyone who mattered. Captain Whitmore approached the formation, and Megan watched Colton's posture shift, slightly straighter, slightly more respectful, the performance of a subordinate who knew exactly which authorities to acknowledge. Whitmore was 35, freshly promoted, his uniform pressed to recruiting poster perfection. He moved through the hangar with the careful steps of someone who had learned warfare from textbooks and believed that made him ready. Training cycle looks good, Ashford. Keep pushing them. Yes, sir. Some of these recruits have serious potential. Others, he glanced toward a cluster of support personnel, maybe should stick to what they know. His eyes found Megan across the hangar, the tech analyst who had been asking questions above her pay grade. His lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Megan held his gaze for 3 seconds, then turned and walked toward the eastern corridor, making herself invisible through the simple act of purposeful movement. Behind her, she heard Colton's voice rise again, berating another trainee for some minor infraction. She kept walking. The messel at noon was a study in military hierarchy made visible through seating arrangements. Officers occupied tables near the serving line, their conversations about tactics and promotion boards conducted at volumes that suggested importance. NCOs claimed the middle territory, eating efficiently and watching everything. Trainees clustered at the far end, segregated by invisible but absolute social boundaries. Toward you. She spotted Eleanor almost toward you. She spotted Eleanor almost immediately. The older woman had claimed a table against the far wall, her contractor coveralls making her nearly invisible among the facility's civilian support staff. She was studying yellowed blueprints spread across her tray, eating mechanically without looking at her food. No one paid her any attention. Colton Ashford held court at the center trainee table, his voice carrying across the hall like he was addressing a stadium. They said the survival course was impossible to complete in under 4 hours. I did it in 2:45. The trick is understanding that most rules are really just suggestions. You've got to think outside the box. Not everyone can do that. His audience nodded along like disciples receiving wisdom. Megan watched them and felt something between pity and disgust. The incident happened at 12:15. Eleanor had finished her meal and was returning her tray to the collection station. The buffet line had thinned to just a few stragglers. She moved with the efficient economy of someone conserving energy, invisible in her ordinariness. Colton approached from the opposite direction. They reached the tray stack at exactly the same moment. Colton's forearm connected with Eleanor's shoulder. Force sent Eleanor stumbling into the serving counter. Her hip struck steel. The tray clattered to the floor with a metallic crash that echoed through a messel gone suddenly silent. Colton grabbed his tray, turned to his watching friends, laughed. Jesus, lady, maybe stick to bingo halls. This is a combat facility. Sycophantic laughter erupted from his group. High fives, backslaps, the sounds of young men celebrating cruelty as victory. Eleanor stood where she had caught herself against the counter, absolutely still. Her face showed nothing. No anger, no fear, no acknowledgement that anything had occurred. She bent with mechanical precision, picked up the tray, placed it on the stack, walked back to her corner table, sat down, resumed studying her blueprints. The only tell was her right hand, the one holding her coffee cup. It trembled just slightly, just for a moment, before she set it down and placed both palms flat on the yellowed paper. Across the messel, Megan felt her hands curl into fists beneath the table. She had wanted to intervene, wanted to cross the room and put Colton Ashford in his place. But the moment had passed too quickly, and Eleanor's almost imperceptible headshake had stopped her before she could move. Not yet. The gesture had said, not now. Near the kitchen, a broad-shouldered man in his late 50s sat rigid with barely contained fury. Sullivan Hargrave, the facility's sergeant major, 35 years of service etched into his weathered face. His hands gripped his tray like he was restraining himself from crossing the room. But his eyes found Eleanor's for just a microsecond. She gave the same tiny shake of her head. He sat back, waited, watched. Captain Whitmore had seen the incident. At the trainee table, only one person didn't participate in the celebration. A man in his early 30s with the compact, capable build of someone who had seen real combat. His name tape said, Brennan, Jack Brennan. Former pararescue, according to his file. Showed him 8 years of pulling wounded soldiers out of firefights. He shook his head in visible disgust and returned to his meal without comment. Megan memorized his face, filed him away as a potential ally. Then she looked back at Eleanor, who was writing something in the margin of her blueprint with a pencil that had probably been sharpened the same way for decades. A single line, small and neat. Megan couldn't read it from across the room, but she could imagine. Personnel evaluation. Systemic failure confirmed. The assessment of a general who had just watched her facility prove it didn't deserve to survive. The harassment escalated with the inevitability of gravity. Day 2 began at 0600 when Megan arrived at the Legacy Systems room to find an equipment cart blocking the corridor. Not accidentally positioned, deliberately placed to obstruct access. She waited. 90 minutes passed. She used the time to memorize guard shift rotations, to catalog communication relay patterns, to count security cameras and note their blind spots. Nothing was wasted. Every moment was data. When Colton finally appeared and moved the cart with exaggerated surprise, Megan walked past without acknowledgement. Oh, sorry about that. Didn't realize anyone actually used this corridor. His friends laughed. Megan kept walking. That afternoon, she found Eleanor in the facility's archive. A climate-controlled chamber housing documentation that had never been digitized. Information too sensitive to exist in hackable form. The older woman had pulled 3 folders from a locked cabinet, each one marked with handwriting that matched the signatures on the original construction blueprints. Vault 7 specifications, National Command Authority codes, 1962 to 1987. Protocol Samson. Eleanor spread the papers across an ancient wooden table and studied them by the light of a single desk lamp. Protocol Samson, she said without looking up. My husband insisted I build it. Megan moved closer, reading over Eleanor's shoulder. Technical specifications, activation sequences, kill radii. This is a self-destruct mechanism. Final failsafe. If Vault 7 is ever breached by unauthorized personnel, thermite charges built into the walls will incinerate everything. The codes, the equipment, anyone inside the blast radius. That's insane. That's Cold War mathematics. Eleanor's voice carried the weight of decisions made before Megan was born. My husband was Colonel Robert Sinclair. He believed that some secrets were worth any price to protect. If the fortress falls, it takes the enemy with it. What happened to him? Beirut, October 23, 1983. The Marine barracks bombing. Eleanor closed the folder with careful precision. He was killed trying to stop it. Shot a GRU intelligence officer who was coordinating the attack. The officer's name was Dmitry Volkov. So his brother swore revenge. Megan felt the pieces clicking together. And now someone's coming for the vault. Someone who has waited 4 decades. Someone who knows our blueprints. Someone who has resources and patience and nothing left to lose. Eleanor looked up, her eyes meeting Megan's with an intensity that felt like standing too close to a fire. I built this facility to protect the things that keep the world from ending. Now I need someone to help me protect it one more time. So is someone young enough to run? Someone smart enough to see patterns? Someone who actually pays attention when the systems try to tell them something's wrong. She stood, gathering the folders. Tomorrow, everything changes. I need to know if you're ready. Megan thought about the life she had tried to build after leaving the army. The normal job, the quiet apartment, the careful distance from anything that reminded her of what she used to be. She had run from herself for 4 years. Maybe it was time to stop. Yes, ma'am, I'm ready. Good. Eleanor tucked the folders under her arm. Because in approximately 36 hours, this facility will come under attack, and you're going to help me stop it. The attack came at 1830 hours on day 4. Megan was in the mess hall when the first alarm shattered the evening routine. Not the familiar drill klaxon that everyone had learned to ignore. The real thing. The sound that meant the impossible was happening. Intruder alert on perimeter breach. Sector 7 North. The screens throughout the hall flickered, then displayed tactical overlays showing the outer defense perimeter. 8 contacts moving with professional precision. Military-grade thermal shielding, coordinated movement patterns that spoke of years of training together. Captain Whitmore's face went white. This has to be a malfunction. We're in the middle of nowhere. We're not even operational anymore. Megan was already moving. Across the mess hall. And waited. She heard Eleanor's voice behind waited. She heard Eleanor's voice behind her, cutting through the rising panic with the authority of someone who had commanded soldiers in actual combat. We are under attack. All personnel to defensive positions. This is not a drill. The lights died. 3 seconds of absolute darkness. The kind of darkness that existed only miles underground, where no natural light had ever reached. Then emergency lighting engaged, bathing everything in hellish crimson. EMP, someone shouted. They hit us with an electromagnetic pulse. The modern systems were down. Tablets dark. Smartphones dead. The digital infrastructure that the younger staff had come to depend on, erased in a single burst of directed energy. But the legacy system still worked. Megan reached the command center and threw herself into a chair in front of a terminal that had been built before integrated circuits became standard. Vacuum tubes, mechanical relays, technology so old it was immune to electromagnetic attack. Her fingers found the keyboard. The commands she had memorized over the past 4 days flowed through her hands without conscious thought. Lockdown protocol, level 2 blast doors, close, confirmation, closing, lockdown protocol, level 3 blast doors, close, confirmation, closing, lockdown protocol, level 4 blast doors, close, confirmation, closing. Somewhere in the facility, massive steel barriers slammed shut with enough force to crush a tank, trapping the intruders between layers of defense they couldn't have anticipated. Captain Whitmore burst into the command center, his uniform disheveled, his face a mask of confusion and fear. What the hell are you doing? Who gave you authorization to... Not her. The voice came from the doorway. Calm, and absolute, carrying decades of command experience in every syllable. Eleanor stepped into the crimson light, and Megan watched her transform. The invisible contractor was gone. In her place stood someone else entirely, back straight, chin raised, eyes that had seen Beirut and Grenada and Desert Storm, and had survived all of it through sheer force of will. Sullivan Hargrave appeared behind her. The sergeant major's face showed no surprise, only recognition. He snapped to attention with the precision of a soldier who had been waiting decades for this moment. Brigadier General Eleanor Sinclair. United States Army Corps of Engineers. Project Director, Granite Peak, 1983 to 1988. His voice echoed through the command center like a roll of thunder. Ma'am, it is an honor to serve under your command again. The words fell into the red-lit room like an artillery strike. Silence. Absolute silence. Then chaos, personnel scrambling to their feet, faces cycling through confusion, disbelief, recognition, the clatter of equipment as people tried to make sense of what they were witnessing. Colton Ashford stood frozen near the back of the room. His face had gone from arrogant confidence to bone-white shock in the span of a heartbeat. His mouth opened. No sound came out. The old woman he had shoved in the mess hall, the grandmother he had mocked, the invisible contractor everyone had dismissed. She was a general. She had designed this entire facility, and she had been watching all of them for 4 days. General, Whitmore sputtered. Retired. You have no authority here. You can't just. Article 90, Uniform Code of Military Justice. Eleanor didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. In the absence of combat-ready command during active attack on a United States military installation, senior military personnel with relevant experience may assume tactical authority. She stepped toward the central command console, and everyone in her path moved aside without being asked. I have combat engineering experience from Beirut, Grenada, and Desert Storm. You have classroom theory and zero hostile contact. Sergeant Major Hargrave, confirm enemy count and armament. Sullivan was already at a tactical console, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency despite the failing power systems. 8 hostiles, ma'am. Military-grade equipment. Professional movement discipline. Okay, they're cutting through the level 2 blast door with thermite. Estimated breach time, 12 minutes. Then we have 11 minutes to prepare. Eleanor's hands found the command console. Her fingers traced across controls she had specified in blueprints drawn in 1983. Systems that had been waiting for her touch. Megan watched her work and understood why Sullivan Hargrave had snapped to attention. Why the veterans in the room were already moving to follow orders. Why even Whitmore had stopped protesting. This was what command looked like. Not rank, not title, not the performance of authority, the real thing. The radio crackled to life with a voice that carried across 4 decades of hatred. General Eleanor Sinclair. I know you are listening. Eleanor's hand found the transmitter without breaking stride from her system configurations. Identify yourself. Colonel Nikolai Volkov, GRU Special Operations Directorate. A pause. The hum of dying generators. One of the weight of history pressing down on everyone in the room. It is an honor to finally meet the architect of this magnificent fortress. Eleanor's jaw tightened. The GRU has no operational authority in the United States. You're conducting an illegal military action on sovereign soil. I am conducting a personal errand. Volkov's voice softened, and somehow that made it more terrifying. Your husband, Colonel Robert Sinclair, killed my brother in Beirut on October 23, 1983. Dmitri was an observer. She unarmed, investigating peace channels. Your husband executed him anyway. Eleanor's hand found the edge of the console, steadied herself against it. Your brother was GRU intelligence. He was coordinating the attack on the Marine barracks. He was trying to prevent it. That's not what happened. It is precisely what happened. Volkov's voice cracked just slightly, the sound of grief that had festered for 4 decades. I have spent my entire career confirming it, building my resources. What cost? Eleanor's voice carried across what cost? Eleanor's voice carried across the command center, and every person present understood they were witnessing something ancient, a wound that had never healed. You're GRU, not a terrorist. You know the strategic implications of what you're trying to do. Those launch codes could destabilize everything. Oh, is your personal revenge worth risking global war? Don't pretend this is about preventing war. Volkov's tone hardened. You're defending American interests. I'm pursuing Russian ones. We're both soldiers following orders. My orders are to protect those codes. What are yours? Silence. And in that non-answer, Eleanor heard the truth. Volkov was acting independently. This wasn't a sanctioned Russian military operation. This was a personal vendetta wrapped in the flag of patriotism. Some terrified, some confused, some terrified, some confused, some already moving toward weapons lockers with the automatic efficiency of trained soldiers. And Megan Caldwell, standing at the Legacy Systems terminal, her hands still resting on the keyboard that had just sealed blast doors throughout the facility. Megan. Yes, ma'am. Eleanor crossed the room and took the younger woman by the shoulders. Around them, the emergency lighting pulsed red. The generators groaned. The sound of thermite cutting through steel echoed from somewhere above. You're going to lead the defense team to Vault 7. Megan's face showed shock. General, I'm just an analyst. I haven't held a combat position in 4 years. Your Army intelligence with field training and the best pattern recognition I've seen in 3 decades. I'm 62 years old. I cannot run 3 miles down a vertical shaft and fight a battle at the end of it. Eleanor's grip tightened. But you can, and you've already proven you see what others miss. You identified the reconnaissance pattern. You understood the threat when everyone else dismissed it. You were paying attention when this entire facility was sleepwalking toward disaster. I don't know if I can. Yes, you do. Eleanor's voice was iron wrapped in velvet. I've watched you for 4 days. I've seen how you move, how you think, how you stayed calm when others panicked. You were a soldier once. You still are. You just forgot. She released Megan's shoulders and stepped back. I will guide you every step of the way. Radio contact, real-time tactical support. But the boots on the ground have to be young, have to be fast, have to be someone I trust. She looked around the room. Sergeant Major Hargrave, how many combat-ready personnel do we have? Sullivan's voice was grim. 14 total. Us, ma'am. 6 with actual hostile fire experience. The rest are trainees on week 2 of their cycle. Then we use the fortress itself as our weapon. Megan, I need you to assemble a team of 7. Our 6 best combat veterans plus yourself. The rest will hold defensive positions throughout the facility. A voice from the back of the room, shaky but determined. Ma'am. Colton Ashford stepped forward. His face was pale. His hands were trembling. But he was moving. Which was more than most people in the room could manage. I volunteer for the vault team. Eleanor studied him with eyes that had judged soldiers for decades. The senator's son. The arrogant trainee who had pushed her in the messel. The loudest voice in any room. Now standing before her with something like genuine fear in his eyes. And something else. Something that looked almost like need. Why? Because I've been telling everyone I'm elite. His voice cracked. Time to prove it or shut up. Eleanor glanced at Megan, a question in her eyes. Megan remembered the messel, the cruelty, the casual dismissal of anyone Colton deemed beneath him. Every instinct told her to refuse, but she also saw the terror he was fighting to control, the desperate hunger to be more than his father's name. He follows orders, she said. No arguments, no questions. He does exactly what he's told. Colton straightened. Yes, ma'am, I understand. Eleanor nodded. Then get your gear, trainee. Ash, you have 3 minutes. As Colton ran toward the equipment lockers, Eleanor turned back to the tactical display. 8 minutes until they breach the inner perimeter, she said. Megan, there's something else you need to know. Something I haven't told anyone since my husband died. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her coverall pocket, yellowed with age, covered in handwriting that matched the blueprints from 1983. Protocol Samson. The final failsafe. If I give you the code word beacon, you enter these 16 digits into the nearest secure terminal. Megan took the paper. Her eyes scanned the numbers, memorizing them automatically. What does it do? It makes sure that if Granite Peak falls, nothing survives. Not the vault, not the codes, not the enemy. She paused. Not us. Megan looked up from the paper, met Eleanor's eyes. You built a self-destruct. My husband believed some secrets were worth any sacrifice. I built it for him. Now I'm trusting you with it. He discovers the protocol exists. He might discover the protocol exists. He might change his tactics. We need him to believe he can win. Megan nodded. The numbers were etched into her memory like scars. Everyone in this facility might die today because of those 16 digits, including her. General. Ready to move. Jack Brennan's voice cut through her thoughts. The former para-rescue stood with 5 other soldiers, all armed, all wearing expressions of grim determination. Colton Ashford ran up last, his gear hastily assembled, his breathing too fast. Megan looked at her team, looked at the tactical display showing Volkov's men cutting through their defenses. Looked at Eleanor, who had trusted her with everything. 4 years ago, she had run from this life. Now it was time to run back. Vault 7, she said, let's move. The journey to Vault 7 took them through service corridors that belonged to another era. The walls were bare concrete, stained with decades of moisture seeping through 2 miles of solid rock. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows at irregular intervals. The air grew colder with each level they descended, temperature dropping as they moved deeper into the mountain's heart. Megan led from the front, her rifle held in ready position, her feet finding paths that existed on no official map. And Eleanor's voice guided her through a wireless earpiece, calling out turns and junctions with the precision of someone reading from memory. Left at the next junction, 20 meters, maintenance shaft 7-Delta. Copy. Behind her, Jack Brennan moved with the economical efficiency of someone who had spent 8 years extracting wounded soldiers from combat zones. His eyes never stopped scanning. His weapon never wavered. Colton Ashford walked third in formation. His movements jerky with barely controlled fear. But he was moving. He was quiet. He was following orders. That counted for something. "The shaft we need is behind a false wall panel," Eleanor continued. "Fourth panel from the junction. Press the upper left corner." Megan found it, a section of concrete that looked identical to everything around it. She pressed the corner and felt the panel shift. Behind it, a vertical shaft descended into darkness. Metal rungs bolted into the rock face. Yeah, no safety rails, no lighting. 300 meters, Eleanor said. Straight down. At the bottom, the original 1983 access tunnel. Megan looked into the darkness and felt her stomach tighten. "Move fast," Eleanor continued. "Volkov's team will breach the inner perimeter in approximately 6 minutes. You need to reach Vault 7 before them." "Copy." Megan slung her rifle across her back and began to climb. The descent took 7 minutes. 7 minutes of cold metal under her hands. One for this many bodies. At the bottom, for this many bodies. At the bottom, the tunnel opened into a corridor that looked like a time capsule from the Cold War. Analog gauges on the walls, mechanical pressure regulators, systems that predated digital technology by decades. Eleanor's voice crackled in her ear. 400 meters to the vault. "But Megan, there's something I need you to understand before you go in." "What?" "Protocol Samson isn't a bluff. It's real, active. And if I tell you to activate it, you have to do it without hesitation, without thinking about consequences, without worrying about the people around you." Megan kept moving, her team following in tactical formation. "You're asking me to be willing to kill everyone in this tunnel, including myself?" "Yes, why?" "Because if Volkov gets those codes, the alternative is worse. Nuclear war. The millions of casualties. The end of everything we've spent 4 decades protecting." Eleanor's voice softened. "I'm asking you to trust me, to trust that if I give that order, it's because there's no other choice. Can you do that?" Megan thought about the life she had tried to build. The normal job, the quiet apartment, the careful distance from anything that required this kind of decision. She had spent 4 years running from responsibility. Maybe it was time to accept it. "Yes, ma'am. I can do that." "Good, because we're about to find out what you're really made of." The vault door appeared ahead, 20 tons of hardened steel, unmarked by time or neglect. Megan approached it and placed her hands on the analog combination lock. Eleanor's voice began reading numbers. Right 32, left 17, right 49. The sequence continued. 12 numbers total, each one carrying the weight of history. The lock clicked. Pneumatic systems engaged with a hiss. Slowly, majestically, the vault opened. And Megan stepped into the heart of America's darkest secret. The room was a museum of the Cold War. CRT monitors glowed with green phosphorescence. Analog switches and dials covered every surface. The launch control console dominated the center of the space, its rows of buttons and indicators unchanged since the facility's construction. In 1983, men had sat at this console and prepared to end the world. The equipment still worked. "Dear God," Jack Brennan whispered, "it's still active. It was designed to survive nuclear war." Eleanor's voice came through the speaker system now, filling the vault with calm authority. "It will survive tonight." Megan moved to the console and began activating systems that should have been dead. One by one, screens flickered to life. Diagnostic routines cycled through code written when her parents were children. The systems responded like they had been waiting. "Position your team in the anteroom," Eleanor said. "The space is designed as a kill zone. One entrance. Interlocking fields of fire. Natural choke points. I built it to be defendable by a small force against a larger one." Megan turned to her team. "Brennan, take the left barrier. Colton, right side. Everyone else, spread across the defensive positions. We hold this doorway. They have to come through single file." "What about you?" Jack asked. "I'll be at the console, coordinating with the general." She met his eyes. "If I tell you to fall back, you fall back. No arguments, no heroics. Understood? Jack nodded. Understood. They took their positions. 7 soldiers in a vault designed to withstand Armageddon, preparing to fight an enemy that had spent decades planning this moment. Outside, in the corridor beyond, the sound of boots on concrete, getting closer. Here they come, Eleanor said. Remember your training. Controlled fire. Make every shot count. For your country. For your brothers and sisters beside you. For the future that depends on you holding this line. The footsteps stopped just beyond the vault entrance. Then Volkov's voice amplified through a portable speaker. General Sinclair, I know you're listening. Final offer. Withdraw your people. Leave the vault. I will allow safe passage. No pursuit. You have my word as an officer. Megan's hand found the grip of her rifle, steadied her breathing. Eleanor's voice came through her earpiece. Quiet but absolute. Don't answer. Let him wonder. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. 15. And then Volkov sighed, and somehow the sound carried through the thick concrete walls. So be it. You chose honor over pragmatism. I respect that. But I will take this vault, General. You cannot stop me. The explosion came half a second later. The shaped charge blew the outer security door off its hinges with a sound like thunder trapped in a bottle. Smoke and concrete dust billowed into the anteroom, turning the emergency lighting into a hellscape of red shadows and swirling debris. Through the chaos came suppressing fire. Automatic weapons, stitching patterns across the defensive positions with professional precision. Megan pressed herself against the barricade, rounds sparking off the reinforced concrete inches from her position. Environmental systems, Eleanor's voice cut through the noise. Panel on your left. Reroute oxygen circulation to this level only. Cut everything else. Megan's hand found the panel, flipped switches that had been designed before she was born. Somewhere in the corridors above, ventilation systems shut down. Air stopped flowing. Oxygen levels began to drop. They have portable systems, Eleanor continued, but high-capacity tanks burn through air in 20 minutes under stress. We force them to rush. Rushed enemies make mistakes. Copy. Megan rose above her barricade, rifle shouldered, and fired twice at movement in the smoke. One of the attackers stumbled, went down. Beside her, Jack Brennan was already engaging targets. Not his shots methodical and precise. 8 years of combat experience flowing through every movement. And Colton Ashford was frozen. His rifle was raised, but his hands were shaking too badly to aim. His face was white beneath the grime and sweat. Every instinct screaming at him to run. Megan reached over and grabbed his shoulder. Not gently. Trainee. Eyes on me. He turned. His pupils were dilated with terror. Breathe. In through your nose. Out through your mouth. You control your body. Oh, you rise, you acquire target. You fire, you rise, you acquire target. You fire twice. Center mass, just like training. I can't. You can, you will. On my mark. Megan rose again, rifle tracking movement. Mark. Colton rose beside her. His weapon wavered. He fired once, twice. Both rounds went wide, but he had fired. He had risen. He had acted instead of freezing. Good, again. Find your breath. Find your target. They worked together for the next 3 minutes. Megan calling targets, Colton engaging with improving accuracy. Each successful shot building confidence that had never existed before. Around them, the battle raged. Jack Brennan dropped 2 more attackers with surgical precision. The other defenders held their positions, pouring fire into the smoke-filled corridor. And slowly, impossibly, the attack began to falter. Atmospheric manipulation, Eleanor said. Now, ours spiked, then dropped again. From beyond, spiked, then dropped again. From beyond the vault came sounds of confusion. Men stumbling. Equilibrium disrupted. Now, Eleanor commanded, push them back. The defenders rose as one. Concentrated fire into the disoriented enemy. 2 more attackers fell. Then the survivors were retreating, dragging their wounded. White disappearing into the smoke. Cease fire, Megan ordered. Defensive positions. They'll regroup. The anteroom fell silent except for heavy breathing and the ringing aftermath of sustained gunfire. Megan checked her team. Jack Brennan had taken a fragment wound to his shoulder but was still functional. One of the other defenders had a gash across her forehead. Colton was shaking but upright. 3 attackers confirmed down, Eleanor reported. 2 wounded. 3 still combat effective. Plus Volkov. A 4 against 7. Better odds than before. Still not good enough. The radio crackled with Volkov's voice. Impressive, Miss Caldwell. Yes, I know who you are. The analyst who noticed what everyone else missed. You've cost me good men today. Megan keyed her radio. Then withdraw. Take your wounded. Leave. The vault remains sealed. You know I cannot do that. Then you know we can't let you have it. A long pause. The silence somehow worse than the gunfire. Then Volkov spoke again, and Megan heard something in his voice she hadn't expected. Pain. In 1983, I watched my mother weep over an empty casket. Dimitri's body was never recovered. She died still hoping he might come home someday. Volkov's voice cracked. I promised her, on her deathbed, I promised I would find the people responsible. I would make them understand what it felt like. Megan looked at Eleanor's photograph, still mounted on the console where the general had placed it decades ago. Did Colonel Robert Sinclair in his dress uniform? Young, confident, gone since Beirut. Your brother coordinated an attack that killed hundreds, Megan said. Whatever he was trying to do, he chose his side. Did he? Volkov asked. Or did he just get caught between empires that didn't care about his intentions? Megan had no answer for that. Some questions didn't have clean answers. Give me the vault, Volkov continued. I will destroy the codes myself. Make sure no one can ever use them. Then I will disappear. You will never see me again. And I should trust you, the man who just attacked a United States military installation? Trust has nothing to do with it. We both want the same thing. An end to Cold War ghosts. An end to weapons that should have been destroyed decades ago. Megan's hand tightened on her rifle. She looked at her team, at the defenders who had fought beside her, at Colton Ashford, who was finally learning what courage actually cost. Then she looked at the vault behind her, at the console that could launch nuclear weapons from halfway around the world, and she made her decision. The vault has a fail-safe, Colonel. Protocol Samson. Thermite charges built into the walls. If unauthorized personnel breach the inner chamber, everything burns. The codes, the equipment, anyone inside the blast radius. Volkov's voice sharpened. You're bluffing. Check your intelligence files. Classification level. Tango 7. The woman who designed this facility is listening to everything we say. She never filed the real specifications with any database. Eleanor's voice came through the vault speaker system, calm and absolute. Protocol Samson active. Countdown initiated. 17 minutes, 32 seconds. The silence that followed was profound. Megan could almost hear Volkov calculating, weighing his promise against the reality of dying in a vault that would become his tomb. This is a bluff, he said finally. Wish you wouldn't kill yourself and your entire team to protect codes that should have been destroyed decades ago. Eleanor's voice was ice. I built this facility to protect the things that keep the world from ending. I will defend it with everything I have, including my life, and the lives of everyone beside me. You're insane. No, Colonel. I'm an engineer. I solve problems. You are a problem. This is the solution. Another silence, longer this time. Then Volkov's voice came back, and there was something different in it, something that sounded almost like respect. You defended Beirut. I read the after-action reports. You held a position with 11 engineers against 40 attackers for 6 hours. That was a long time ago. Some things don't change. Professional to professional, General. I believe you would die here. I believe you've made peace with it. A pause. I have not made peace with dying for nothing. If your protocol, Samson, is real, then this vault becomes worthless to me, and my promise to my mother becomes impossible to fulfill. Then leave, Eleanor said. Take your wounded. Withdraw. Honor your mother by living instead of dying. The longest silence yet. Then footsteps, moving away. Orders in Russian, clipped and professional. The sound of wounded men being carried, equipment being secured, vehicles starting somewhere in the distance. Megan held her position, rifle ready, unwilling to believe it was over. "General, they're pulling back." Sullivan Hargrave's voice came through the radio. "Confirmed withdrawal through level 3, vehicles departing the perimeter." Eleanor's voice was quiet. "Hold positions for another 5 minutes. Confirm they're clear of the facility before anyone moves." Megan let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Around her, the defenders began to relax, weapons lowering, shoulders slumping. Colton Ashford slid down his barricade until he was sitting on the floor. One of his hands were still shaking, but his eyes were clear. "We did it," he whispered. "We actually did it." Megan looked at him, remembered the arrogant trainee who had pushed an old woman in the mess hall, compared him to the young soldier who had just faced his first real combat and hadn't broken. Something had changed. Maybe something could still grow. "We survived," she said. "Don't confuse that with winning." But even as she said it, she allowed herself the smallest moment of relief. See, the vault was secure. The bluff had worked. They were going to live. Then she looked at the Protocol Samson console, and her blood turned to ice. "Eleanor, the countdown. What about it? It's not stopping." Megan crossed to the console, her hands flying across controls she barely understood. The display showed 16 minutes remaining, 15:59, 15:58. Counting down. "General, this isn't a bluff anymore. The protocol is actually running. How do I abort?" Hannah Eleanor's voice came back, and for the first time since the attack began, Megan heard something other than absolute confidence. Concern. "Enter the abort code. 16 digits. The sequence I gave you." Megan's fingers found the keypad. The numbers burned into her memory flowed through her hands. The system rejected them. "It's not accepting the code. That's impossible. I'm telling you what I see. The abort sequence is being rejected." Silence on the radio. Then Eleanor's voice, barely above a whisper. "The abort protocol only functions from authorized terminals. Command center. Level 6 junction stations. Not from inside the vault itself." Megan's hands went still on the keyboard. "What?" "It's a security feature. Robert insisted on it. The system assumes anyone inside the vault during activation is potentially compromised, to prevent an enemy from forcing abort under duress. You designed it, so we can't stop it from here. I designed it to Robert's specifications. Because I trusted his judgment. Because in 1983, it seemed like the right decision. 14 minutes on the countdown." "Then we need to reach an authorized terminal," Megan said. "Command center, level 6. "How long?" "Command center is at least 12 minutes from your position. Level 6 junction, maybe 10. But the corridors may be blocked. And there's another problem." "What problem?" "The 1995 system's upgrade. It changed the authentication architecture on the junction stations. The original abort sequence may not be compatible with the updated terminals." Megan stared at the countdown, at the numbers ticking away towards 0. "May not be?" "I don't know. I wasn't part of the 1995 refit. I was already retired." 13 minutes. "Then we run," Megan said. "And we hope." She turned to her team. "Everyone move. Now. Multiple routes to the nearest authorized terminals. Don't stop for anything. Don't wait for anyone who falls behind." Jack Brennan was already on his feet. Wait, what about you?" "I'll take the central passage. Brennan, you take the eastern route with half the team. Colton, you're with me." Colton looked up from where he sat. His face was gray with exhaustion. "Ma'am, you wanted to prove yourself. This is your chance. Move." They ran. The corridors blurred past in emergency lighting and shadows. Megan's lungs burned. Her legs screamed. Colton ran beside her, younger and faster, but staying with her pace instead of pulling ahead. 12 minutes became 11. 11 became 10. Eleanor's voice guided them through junctions and passages, calling out obstacles before they reached them. A collapsed ceiling here. A sealed blast door there. 9 minutes. 8. The level 6 junction appeared ahead. A maintenance station with analog controls that predated the digital era. Megan threw herself at the terminal, her fingers finding the keypad. She entered the abort code. The system processed for 3 seconds. Error, authentication protocol mismatch. Our abort sequence incompatible with 1995 system architecture. Megan slammed her hand against the console. It's not working. The 1995 upgrade changed the authentication. The original abort code doesn't match. 7 minutes. Eleanor's voice was strained. I'm trying from the command center. Same result. The systems don't recognize the 1983 protocols. 6 minutes. Megan stared at the screen, at the countdown that would incinerate everything she had fought to protect, at the legacy that would end not with enemy fire, but with incompatible engineering. Then Sullivan Hargrave's voice crackled through the radio. General, Lieutenant, I might have something. His boots pounded through a corridor somewhere in the facility. His breathing was ragged, but his voice carried certainty. My son, Donovan. He was part of the 1995 refit team, the one that changed these systems. 5 minutes. I told him about Protocol Samson, violated classification, but he was working on the authentication architecture. He needed to understand what he was protecting. Sullivan's voice cracked. He called me the night before he deployed to Afghanistan, 2004, said he'd built something into the upgrade, a failsafe for the failsafe, said he believed everyone deserved a second chance. 4 minutes. Megan heard a door slam through the radio, heard Sullivan's hands on a keyboard. Donovan left a maintenance override, Sullivan continued, hidden in the 1995 code, accessible from any upgraded terminal. He never told anyone except me. Made me promise to remember the sequence in case it was ever needed. Megan closed her eyes. A dead man's foresight, a father's memory, a legacy reaching across 20 years. 3 minutes. I'm entering it now, Sullivan said. God, son. I hope you were right. Silence. 2 minutes, 30 seconds. 2 minutes. 1 minute 30. The junction terminal in front of Megan flickered. New text appeared on the screen. External override detected. Source: Maintenance Protocol DH-1995. Validating authentication. 1 minute. Validating. 50 seconds. Validating. 40 seconds. Override accepted. Abort sequence authorized. Terminating protocol. Samson. 30 seconds. 20. 10. Protocol Samson deactivated. All systems returning to standby mode. Megan collapsed against the terminal. Her entire body was shaking. Her legs gave out. She slid to the floor beside the console that had almost killed everyone in the facility. Through the radio, she heard Sullivan Hargrave crying. Not the sound of a sergeant major with 35 years of service. The sound of a father who had just watched his dead son save dozens of lives. Donovan, he whispered. You saved them all, son. You saved them all. Colton slid down beside her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he said quietly, Who was Donovan? Megan wiped her eyes. Someone who believed in second chances. She looked at Colton, at the young man who had started this week as an arrogant bully and was ending it as something that might possibly become a real soldier. Maybe he was right. The aftermath took hours. Medical teams arrived from Northcom. Wounded were evacuated. Statements were taken. The facility was secured. Sullivan Hargrave sat alone in the command center for a long time, holding a photograph he had carried in his wallet for 20 years. A young man in engineer's coveralls, standing beside a terminal that looked identical to the ones in the junction stations. Donovan Hargrave, 1971 to 2004. His son. Eleanor found him there, still holding the photograph. She sat down beside him without speaking. He was too soft for the military, Sullivan said finally. That's what his mother always said. Too idealistic. Believed in things like second chances and redemption. The world kept proving him wrong and he kept believing anyway. Eleanor looked at the photograph, at the smile of a man who had died in Afghanistan, never knowing his hidden code would one day save dozens of lives. He wasn't wrong, she said. He was just ahead of his time. Sullivan nodded, couldn't speak. We're adding him to the memorial wall, Eleanor continued. Full honors. The people who serve here should know his name, should know what he did. He'd have liked that. Sullivan's voice was thick. He always said the best engineering was invisible. The things that work so well, people forget they're there until they're needed. Eleanor placed her hand on his shoulder. His legacy saved us all today. That's not invisible. That's immortal. In the command center, Eleanor Sinclair stood before a video conference with officials who had the authority to classify or declassify anything they wanted. Megan watched from the side of the room, exhausted beyond words as Eleanor explained everything. The reconnaissance pattern, the attack, the defense of Vault 7, the near disaster with Protocol Samson, and the dead engineer whose foresight had saved them all. When she finished, the senior official on the screen, a three-star general from the Pentagon, was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke. General Sinclair, in light of tonight's events, I'm authorized to offer you immediate reactivation, full rank restoration, command of Granite Peak with authority to redesign security protocols. Eleanor didn't blink. Sir, I'm 62 years old, and you just held off a professional assault team with Cold War tactics and pure stubbornness. Age is clearly irrelevant. Will you accept? Eleanor glanced at Megan, at Sullivan Hargrave standing at attention near the door, the photograph of his son still visible in his breast pocket. At the facility that had been her life's work, threatened and defended and still standing. On one condition, she said, I choose my own staff. Done? Who do you want? Aunt Sergeant Major Hargrave as Facility Command, Sergeant Major. Private First Class Brennan for training operations. Trainee Ashford for the development program. She paused. And Lieutenant Megan Caldwell as Director of Intelligence and Threat Assessment. Megan's head snapped up. The Pentagon general raised an eyebrow. The analyst who noticed the pattern. The one who led the vault defense. Yes, sir. Approved. When can you start? We already have, sir. Eleanor turned off the screen and faced the room. Sullivan Hargrave was smiling through the grief that still shadowed his eyes. A rare expression on his weathered face. Jack Brennan nodded with professional approval. And Megan Caldwell stood slowly, her exhausted body protesting every movement, and met Eleanor's eyes. General, I don't know if I'm qualified for... You identified a threat that everyone else dismissed. You led a team into combat and brought them out alive. Once you stayed in a vault that was about to incinerate everything inside it because someone had to hold the line. Eleanor crossed the room and placed her hands on Megan's shoulders. 4 years ago, you left the Army because you thought you wanted a normal life. Tonight, you proved that wasn't true. You're a soldier, Megan. You always were. You just needed someone to remind you. Megan felt tears prick at her eyes, forced them back. What happens now? Now, Eleanor said, we rebuild. We make this facility what it should have been from the beginning, and we make sure that when the next threat comes, we're ready. She released Megan's shoulders and turned toward the door. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start work. As she walked away, Sullivan Hargrave fell into step beside her. Their voices carried back through the corridor. Just like old times, ma'am. Better than old times, Sergeant Major. This time we have people worth trusting. Megan watched them go. However, then she looked around the command center, at the legacy terminals that had saved them, at the tactical displays showing a facility securing itself for the night, at the photograph of Colonel Robert Sinclair, still mounted where Eleanor had placed it decades ago. Young, confident, gone since Beirut. But his legacy remained. In the walls he had helped design, in the protocols he had insisted upon, in the woman who had loved him enough to build his vision into steel and stone. And now, out in the people who would carry that vision forward. Epilogue, 6 months later, Granite Peak had transformed. The facility that had been scheduled for decommissioning was now the premier strategic defense training center in the United States. Enrollment had tripled. The focus had shifted from theoretical exercises to real-world preparation for asymmetric threats. And at the center of it all, 2 women ran operations with the quiet efficiency of people who had survived the impossible together. Megan Caldwell stood in the training bay, watching the newest cycle of recruits run through their first combat simulation. She wore lieutenant's bars now, earned through fire and blood rather than time and grade. Her tablet displayed threat assessment patterns from 12 facilities across the country. Her mind was already 3 moves ahead, anticipating problems before they developed. Some things never changed. Eleanor Sinclair appeared beside her, coffee in hand, and watching the recruits with the critical eye of someone who had seen every mistake a soldier could make. Ashford's doing well, Eleanor observed. Megan nodded. He's different now. Across the bay, Colton Ashford was demonstrating weapon maintenance to a group of junior trainees. His voice was calm, patient, instructive. Nothing like the arrogant loudmouth who had pushed an old woman in the mess hall. He had earned his second chance. Every day he worked to deserve it. Ain't a real competence doesn't announce itself. Real competence doesn't announce itself, Colton said. It shows up when it matters. In the quiet moments when nobody's watching. The trainees nodded, taking notes. Megan smiled. He learned that from you, Eleanor said. He learned it from getting his assumptions shattered. I just helped put the pieces back together. Sullivan Hargrave crossed the bay toward them, a folder in his weathered hands. General, Lieutenant, I wanted you to see this. He opened the folder. Inside was a photograph. A young man in engineer's coveralls, standing beside a terminal that looked identical to the ones in the junction stations. Donovan, taken during the 1995 refit. Eleanor took the photograph gently, studied the face of the man who had saved them all from beyond the grave. He had your eyes, she said quietly, and he had his mother's heart. Sullivan's voice was thick. She always said he was too soft for the military, too idealistic, believed in second chances when the world kept proving they didn't exist. Megan looked at the photograph, at the smile of a man who had died in Afghanistan 20 years ago, never knowing his hidden code would one day save dozens of lives. We're adding him to the memorial wall, Eleanor said. Full honors. The people who serve here should know his name. Sullivan nodded. Holder wiped his eyes and straightened. He'd have to speak. Megan placed her hand on his shoulder. He's part of the legacy now, she said. The most important part. Sullivan wiped his eyes and straightened. He'd have liked that. He always said the best engineering was invisible. The things that work so well, people forget they're there. Eleanor smiled. He was right. The Pentagon wants us to evaluate the other 11 facilities, Eleanor said later, when Sullivan had returned to his duties. Same protocol we used here. Go in quietly. We assess vulnerabilities, recommend changes. Megan nodded. When do we start? Next month. I want you leading the first assessment. Take Sullivan and a small team. Me? You noticed what everyone else missed. You led when leadership was needed. You held the line when holding it seemed impossible. Eleanor turned to face her directly. Decades ago, I built this facility with my husband. He believed that fortresses were only as strong as the people who defended them. Every day you prove he was right. Megan felt the weight of those words, the responsibility they carried, the honor. I won't let you down, General. I know you won't. Eleanor finished her coffee and set the cup aside. My husband also believed in legacy, not the things we build, but the people we train to protect what matters after we're gone. She placed her hand on Megan's shoulder. You're my legacy now, Lieutenant. Make it count. That night, after the facility had settled into its quiet rhythms, Megan walked alone to the memorial wall. The newest plaque gleamed under soft lighting. Lieutenant Donovan Hargrave, 1971 to 2004. He believed everyone deserved a second chance. Beside it, older plaques bore other names, other sacrifices, other legacies. And at the center, the oldest plaque of all, Colonel Robert Sinclair, 1945 to 1983. The fortress is only as strong as those who defend it. Megan touched both plaques gently. Two men who had never met, separated by decades, connected by the belief that some things were worth protecting at any cost. She understood now why Eleanor had come back, why she had spent 4 days invisible in a facility full of people who didn't recognize her. Legacy wasn't about being remembered. It was about making sure the things you built would survive after you were gone. Megan turned and walked back toward the command center. Tomorrow there would be new threats to assess, new patterns to analyze, new soldiers to train, and the work never ended. But that was the point. In the training bay, the lights had dimmed for the night shift. Colton Ashford stood alone, running through weapon maintenance procedures one more time. Not because anyone was watching, not because he had to, because it mattered. Real competence doesn't announce itself, he said to the empty room. He thought about the woman he had pushed in the mess hall, the grandmother he had mocked, Toady the general who had given him a chance to become something more than his father's name. He thought about the analyst who had led them into a vault and taught him how to breathe through fear. He thought about the dead engineer whose hidden code had saved all their lives. Second chances. Maybe some people did deserve them. Maybe he was finally becoming someone who did. In her quarters, Eleanor Sinclair sat at a small desk, writing in a leather-bound journal that had belonged to her husband. The last entry before hers was dated October 22nd, 1983. The night before Beirut, Katie, Robert had written, "If something happens tomorrow, remember that the fortress is only as strong as those who defend it. Build something that matters. Train people who will protect it. That's the only legacy that counts." Below his words, Eleanor added her own. "Robert, I found them. The ones who will carry this forward after I'm gone. A woman who sees patterns in chaos. When a young man learning that strength isn't volume. A sergeant major who carries his son's memory like a shield. They're ready. I think you'd be proud." She closed the journal and looked at the photograph on her desk. Robert in his dress uniform. Young, confident, still alive in her memory. "We did it," she whispered. "We protected what matters." Then she turned off the light and let the silence of the mountain settle around her. The fortress was watching. 2 miles beneath the Colorado mountains, systems hummed their steady rhythm. Generators pulsed with the heartbeat of geothermal power. Blast doors held their perfect seals, and in the darkness, secrets waited, protected by walls of granite and steel, protected by people who understood that some things were worth any sacrifice, protected by legacies that reached across decades, connecting the dead to the living, the past to the future, the builders to the defenders. Megan Caldwell walked the corridors alone, checking systems, reviewing patterns, watching for signs that others would miss. She had walked in as a tech analyst. She had walked out as something more. A soldier, a leader, a guardian of things that mattered. The terminal beside her beeped. New data incoming, new patterns to analyze. Megan smiled and got back to work. The fortress was watching, and so was she. The end.